"Ma'am, you can't stand there." The voice came clipped and bright across the wet grass, the voice of a man who enjoyed the sound of his own competence. "This is a parade ground, not a sightseeing deck. Drill is precision work. Why don't you let one of my people walk you over to the hospitality tent before you trip over a guidon and end up in somebody's graduation photo?" She did not move toward the tent. She did not move at all. The posture came first, the way it always had. Heels together. Weight even through both feet. Shoulders set without effort. Hands curled loose at the seams of a charcoal raincoat that hid everything underneath it. The morning was a clean one, the sky already a hard scrubbed blue at 0640, and the parade field of the post stretched out in front of her in long mowed stripes toward a reviewing stand draped in red, white, and blue bunting. First Lieutenant Spencer Royce, 27 years old and immaculate, took her measure and slotted her where she fit. No badge lanyard, no clipboard, but the one he held. A plain coat and a stillness he read as the stillness of someone who did not belong. Lost civilian, protocol contractor. Somebody's +1 wandered past the rope line. "There's a process," Royce said. "Gentler now, the way you gentle your voice for the elderly. Guests in the stands, the field's for the formation." The field was for the formation. On that at least they agreed. 4 companies of the leadership course graduating class were dressing their lines 50 meters out, gray and black guidons snapping in the small wind, the band shaking down by the far hash. The pass in review was the post's showpiece, and this morning it was Royce's, his stopwatch, his timeline, his to conduct. He had been planning it for 3 weeks, and he intended it to be perfect, and perfect did not include a woman in a raincoat on his grass. The woman in the coat was looking at the formation, not at him. He thought she was looking for the exit. She was counting the paces between heels in the front rank of the nearest company and finding 2 of them wrong. The second man from the left had crowded his interval by half a boot. The 4th was a hair off the line of cover. Small things, the kind of small things that 1,000 eyes would slide right past, and that one particular kind of eye could not. "I'll stand here," she said. 3 words. Royce blinked. Most people apologized when he used the gentle voice. They thanked him for his patience, and they went where he pointed. He filed her under difficult and moved on, because difficult was a category he had a process for, too. Second Lieutenant Brock Hale drifted over, 24 and grinning, scenting sport the way young men scent it. "Vendor lady," he murmured, low, just for the cadre. "She probably thinks pass in review means there's a craft fair somewhere." A couple of the junior cadre laughed behind their hands. The woman let it go by the way a stone lets weather go by. Nothing in her face moved. Nothing in her stance shifted. She simply continued to read the line. Across the field, Command Sergeant Major Curtis Abernathy, 50 years old and built like a door, was moving toward the stand with an armful of program cards. He was too far to hear the words. He saw the coat. He saw the stillness. He saw the way the woman stood with her heels together on a sloped piece of grass without seeming to think about it. Weight balanced for the slope. The way only a certain kind of person stands. The way you stand when standing still has at some point in your life been a thing you trained to survive. It stopped him mid-stride. He looked at her, the way you look at a face you have almost placed and cannot, the name circling just out of reach. The skin on the back of his neck did something it had not done in years. Then he kept walking, slower than before, his eyes coming back to her twice more before he reached the stand. Royce turned back to his stopwatch, certain he had handled the morning's one small wrinkle. 3 weeks of planning, and the only variable left was a lost civilian who would be in the stands inside of 5 minutes. He clicked the watch. He squared his clipboard. He felt, briefly, the clean pleasure of a man whose morning is going exactly to plan. The families were arriving now, in their good clothes, mothers and fathers, and small brothers in stiff collars, climbing the bleacher steps with the careful pride of people who have driven 300 miles to watch 8 weeks of someone else's hard work pay off in 14 minutes of marching. They did not know the cadence had crept. They did not know a boy in the third rank was already too hot. They saw the bunting and the blue sky and the long, clean stripes, and it was beautiful to them, and that was the only review most of them would ever give. Royce loved them for it, in his way. He was building the morning for their cameras. He had simply forgotten, as the proud and careful sometimes do, that a parade is not the picture of a parade. Behind him, the woman he had dismissed closed the 2-pace gap she had found in the front rank, with nothing but her eyes, willing the line straight, as if the formation were already hers and simply did not know it yet. And across the field, the command sergeant major did not look away from her. The cadence had crept the afternoon before. It was the thing she remembered first about the rehearsal. She had stood in the same coat at the same edge of the field on Thursday, watching, while the band stepped off and Royce clicked his stopwatch with a small, private satisfaction. Hargrove had said it to no one, quietly, almost to herself. 124, it's crept. A cadence is a heartbeat. 120 steps to the minute, every minute, or the whole body of the thing begins to stumble, rank by rank, the way a long line of anything stumbles when its pulse runs fast. She heard the 4 extra beats, the way a mother hears a cough through a wall, instantly, before she has decided to listen. Beside her, Abernathy had checked his own count out of reflex and found her right 4 full seconds before the bandmaster keyed his own correction down the line. He had said nothing then. He had filed it. Sergeants major file things. It is most of the job. Now it was Friday, parade morning, and the companies held at attention through the long, flat wait before the guests seated. The asphalt apron at the edge of the field was already throwing heat up in slow waves. The flags hung, then stirred, then hung. Hargrove watched the third rank of Bravo Company, where a private named Wesley Tran, 19 years old, had locked his knees. She read it the way she read everything, in pieces that assembled themselves before she chose to assemble them. The chin a degree too high, the color leaving the face from the bottom up, jaw to cheek to brow. The small sway, barely a sway, the body beginning to negotiate with gravity over terms it was going to lose. 8 weeks of training, and the boy was about to drop in the last hour of it, in front of the people who had driven a day to watch him. She crossed 10 feet of grass without hurry and spoke to Abernathy, who had drifted near, and not to Royce, who had not. "Third rank, 4th from the left," she said. "He's going down. Bend his knees and get water moving up the line." Abernathy did not ask how she knew. There are tones of voice you do not question, and she had used one. He moved on it. A word to the squad leader. The squad leader's hand at the back of Tran's knees, breaking the lock. A canteen passing up the rank, hand to hand, fast and quiet. The boy drank. His color came back from the top down, the way it had left from the bottom up. He stayed on his feet. He would graduate in 2 hours and never know how close he had come to folding face first into his own ceremony. "Good eye, ma'am," Abernathy said. "Old habit," said Hargrove. Royce arrived a beat late and saw a civilian interfering with his formation. Not a soldier saved. A rope line crossed. A guest where a guest should not be. "Ma'am, I need you behind the line," he said, and did not ask what had happened, and so never learned that anything had happened at all. He did not see Tran. He had not seen Tran the whole morning. He saw the coat and the woman and the wrongness of her being on his grass, and that was the entire width of what he saw. It is a strange blindness, the kind that comes with a clipboard. Royce could have told you to the inch where each guidon should ride, and to the second when each company should wheel. He could not have told you the name of the boy 3 ranks deep who was 19 years old and 1,000 miles from his mother and shaking. The two kinds of seeing do not always live in the same person. In Royce, they had never once met. He measured the formation the way you measure a wall, in straight lines and right angles. And a soldier is not a wall, and a soldier about to fall is the one thing no straight line will ever show you. Abernathy watched it and said nothing, but his jaw set. He looked at the woman in the charcoal coat, the way you look at someone whose name is on the tip of your tongue, and whose name he was beginning to suspect he very much ought to know, and ought to have known the second she opened her mouth about a cadence. Then he stepped behind the reviewing stand, out of the wind, took out his phone, and began, very quietly, to make a call to the post protocol office. By the time the bleachers began to fill, the cadre had a name for her. The clipboard lady first, then the craft fair colonel, which Hale coined and Royce permitted, because a shared joke tightens a small command, and Royce liked his command tight. It moved through the staff in grins and sidelong looks, the way a coin moves through a crowd. Hale did an impression of her stillness, standing stiff with his chin thrust out and his hands frozen at his sides, and got his laugh. The morning had given the cadre a villain who could not fight back, and there are few things a bored detail enjoys more. Royce permitted all of it. He even fed it, with a remark here and a raised eyebrow there, because contempt shared downward is a kind of glue, and he was building something with it, whether he knew it or not. Someone had set a folding chair in the shade for her earlier, an act of ordinary kindness from a soldier nobody noticed. Royce had it taken away. "Guests sit in the stands, ma'am, not on my field." She was left standing in the building heat at the edge of the formation, and she did not ask for the chair back, and she watched the companies. The sun climbed. The asphalt breathed. The bunting on the stand went from limp to bright as the light found it. They thought the heat would move her. Heat had never been the thing that moved her. It was specialist Caleb Ruiz who broke from the pack. 22 years old, a cadre soldier with 2 years in and a face that had not yet learned to hide what it felt, he came across the grass on his own initiative with a cold bottle of water out of Royce's eyeline and held it out like an apology he was not allowed to say out loud. "You probably shouldn't be out here in this heat, ma'am," Ruiz said. "Can I get you anything else?" She took the water. She read his name off the tape on his chest. "Thank you, Ruiz." A pause while she cracked the seal. "How's the course been?" He told her the truth, which surprised him as it came out, because he had meant to say something polite. It had been hard. He had learned more in 8 weeks than in the 2 years before it. He had nearly quit in week 3, and was glad now that he hadn't. She listened the way few people are ever listened to in a lifetime, completely, her eyes on his face and nowhere else. And she asked one more question, about what had nearly made him quit, and he answered that one too. "You can stand up straight when the colors pass," she told him when he made to go. "That's all I want from anybody." Ruiz walked back to his post, not quite understanding why he felt steadier than he had all morning, why a stranger's 2 minutes of attention had set something in him level. He had been mocked, too, in his way, 2 years ago when he first arrived. The slow one, the quiet one, until he learned to disappear into the work. He had recognized something in the woman in the coat without knowing what it was. He recognized the way she took the insult and did not spend it back, the way still water takes a thrown stone. He had thought, handing her the water, that he was being kind to someone who needed it. He would understand, much later, that he had been the one who needed something, and that she had given it to him for free, with her whole attention, in the worst part of the heat. Behind the bunting, Abernathy lowered his phone. He had asked the post protocol office one precise question. Who, exactly, was the reviewing officer flying in this morning, and what did she look like? The answer had taken a moment to come back through 2 offices, and when it came, it changed his face by degrees, the way a tide changes a beach. Nothing, and nothing, and then everything all at once, and the ground not where it was. He looked across the field at the woman in the charcoal coat, drinking a young specialist's bottle of water, and he went very still himself, the stillness traveling from him toward her like a current finding its match. If you have ever been the quiet one at the edge of the room, the one people talk past, the one they decide they have already figured out before you have said a word, then you already know how this morning is going to feel when it turns. Subscribe to Honor Tales and stay with her, because the field is about to learn what the Sergeant Major just learned. Royce decided to make her a problem in the system. It is the oldest weapon in any institution, older than fists, cleaner than fists, and it leaves no marks. You do not have to touch a person. You only have to file them. Turn the human being on your grass into a line item, a lapse, a box that needs checking, and the institution will do the removing for you while your own hands stay clean. Royce keyed his radio to the protocol NCO and asked, in the cool, flat tone of a man reporting a security lapse, for someone to come verify the unbadged civilian on his field and escort her to the stands. Somebody had let a contractor pass the rope. He would like that corrected before the general's car arrived. He informed her of it himself, with cold courtesy, because courtesy was the uniform he wore over the contempt. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to produce a credential or be escorted off the field. There's a process." She answered him in regulation and in numbers. "Sequence is wheel, right at 0800, Hargrove said. "Present arms at 0804. Pass in review at 0810. The figures came off her without effort, the way the alphabet comes off anyone else. "Your interval's at 40 inches. Regulation's 40, so you're fine there." A beat. "Your cadence isn't. It crept yesterday, and it'll creep again the second that band gets nervous, and it'll get nervous the moment the brass is in the stand. Watch your bass drum, not your watch." She was precisely, quietly, infuriatingly correct about every figure on the field. It landed on Royce as insolence, not expertise. He heard a know-it-all civilian who thought reading a field manual made her a soldier, the kind of person who watches one ceremony and decides she could run it better. The correctness was the offense. There is no one a small man resents like the person who is right at him while standing where he has decided they should not stand. "I don't need a vendor to read me my own timeline," he said, and the word vendor came out with an edge now, sharpened on her competence. "Get her verified and seated before the general's wheels are down." What he could not have said, because he did not know it about himself, was that the timeline was the only thing he had. A young officer is given so little that is truly his. Not the soldiers, who belong to the army. Not the mission, which comes down from above. But the parade, this one morning, the sequence, and the cadence, and the 40-inch interval, that he had been handed whole, and he had wrapped both hands around it. A woman who could recite it back to him better than he could run it was not a help. She was a thief. That was how it sat in him, under the courtesy, where he could not look at it. Abernathy chose that moment to try once, quietly, the way a senior man tries to save a junior one from himself before the fall. He came alongside Royce, close, his voice pitched for one set of ears. "Lieutenant." "A word." "Sergeant Major, I've got a parade to run." "Lieutenant," a half-step closer. "You're going to want to hear me out." Royce did not break stride. "Noted," and kept walking, clipboard up, eyes on his timeline, the single most consequential word of his morning spent without a thought. Abernathy stopped on the grass and let him go. He could have ended it with one sentence, 8 words, her rank and her name, and the morning would have rearranged itself instantly and quietly, and the lieutenant would have been spared the thing that was coming. He looked at the woman in the coat, standing in the heat where she had said she would stand, and at the lieutenant riding the high of his own immaculate morning, and he made a decision that was almost gentle in its cruelty. He let it go. Some lessons only land when they land in front of everyone, and some men only learn the weight of a thing by being standing under it when it falls. The protocol escort started across the long stripes of grass toward the woman in the charcoal coat, and at the far gate, the led vehicle of the reviewing party turned in off the access road, sun flashing white off its hood. 2 clocks were running now. Only Abernathy could see that they were about to collide. Unable to get through the front door, Abernathy worked the edges of the thing. He pulled Hale aside, and then the protocol NCO, and said the only thing 30 years had taught him to say in a moment like this one. "Hold the escort. 1 more minute. Let me make a call." Calm. Flat. The voice of a man asking for something small. Hale frowned, caught between 2 ranks pulling opposite ways. "Sergeant Major, the LT already gave the—" "Son?" Abernathy's voice dropped to the register that had moved tired men across open ground in 3 different countries. "In 30 years I have learned that the most dangerous person on any field is the one who is not trying to be noticed. Everybody loud is telling you exactly how much they're worth. It's the quiet one you watch. Hold the escort." He did not say who she was. You do not out a general who has chosen to stand quietly at the edge of a field. That is her choice to make, and her moment to spend, not a sergeant major's. You give the lieutenant one last door to walk through on his own 2 feet. It is a courtesy. It is also a test, and Abernathy already suspected, with a heaviness in his chest, how the test was going to come out. He had run 100 parades on this field, and a dozen others. He had watched 100 young officers like Royce come through, polished and certain, and convinced the Army was a thing you operated rather than a thing you served. Most of them grew out of it. A few of them grew out of it the hard way, in one terrible morning, with everyone watching, and Abernathy had learned long ago that you cannot save a man from that morning. You can only make sure that when it comes, it is true, and that there is someone standing by afterward to help him build something better out of the wreckage. He intended to be that someone. He had, in fact, already decided it, standing on the grass with a folded program in his hand and a general at his shoulder in a charcoal coat. Hale relayed the caution. Royce heard it as the sergeant major going soft, or worse, covering for whoever had let a civilian pass the rope in the first place, an old NCO protecting a gate guard's mistake. He did not slow down. He doubled down. Escort proceeds. The decision was entirely his now, made out loud in front of his cadre, with the brass 100 meters from the curb. He had been given the door, and he had walked past it without seeing it was there. And the woman at the center of it all kept reading the field. She could not see it. A guidon held a hand's width too low in Charlie Company, the bearer's arm tiring. Alpha Company set a half-second slow on the wheel they had not yet executed. She could read it in the lean of the right guide, in the way he had cheated his weight. She had reviewed parades on 4 continents. She had stood in reviewing stands in 3 different decades and taken the salute of formations larger than this whole post. She had buried men who once marched in lines exactly like these. A rope line was not going to teach her one thing about a body of troops she did not already know down in the bone. She was, in the most literal sense, already doing the reviewing officer's job. From the wrong side of the rope, in a borrowed patch of heat, with an escort walking toward her to remove her from it. Ruiz felt it before he could put a word to it. He watched the escort move across the grass toward the woman he had brought water to, and his stomach turned over for no reason he could name. He looked for Abernathy and found him standing near the civilian at something that was not quite parade rest and not quite the position of attention, a posture a command sergeant major holds for exactly one kind of person and no other. And the wrongness of the picture began to dawn on Ruiz a full beat before it dawned on anyone else on that field. He had seen Abernathy stand 100 ways in 2 years. He had seen him stand easy and stand hard, stand bored at a formation, and stand grave at a memorial. He had never once seen him stand the way he was standing now, half a step off a civilian woman's shoulder, chin level, hands quiet, the body holding itself ready the way it holds itself ready in the presence of rank it respects. Ruiz did not have the word for it yet, but his body had the word before his mind did, and his body had gone cold. The cadre were certain they knew who she was. They had named her, mocked her, filed her, and they were carrying that certainty toward the edge of a cliff they could not see. They were about to learn they had it precisely backward, every word of it, the whole morning inverted in a single quiet sentence. If you want to be there when it flips, subscribe now, because the staff car door is already opening into the sun. The escort reached the edge of the grass, and the woman in the charcoal coat finally turned her head. Not toward the escort, toward the staff car door swinging wide in the white morning light. For one moment, she was not on the parade field at all. She was 36 years old, and the senior officer breathing. It was 2007, and the country was Iraq, and the unit was a route clearance task force grinding up a canal road at the gray edge of morning. Major Eleanor Hargrove had been riding as the battalion operations officer, 3rd vehicle in the order of march, a clipboard officer, a planner, a woman who was supposed to watch and advise and let the line officers do the fighting. That was the plan. Plans are a list of things that have not been tested yet. Then the ambush folded over them like a hand closing, all at once, from 3 sides. The first 90 seconds took the company commander, Captain Dean Bauer, a good man with a young family and a way of laughing that the company had built itself around. And the first 90 seconds also cut a platoon off in the houses on the far side of the canal, with their radios screaming and their leader hit. There was a version of the rules where she waited for orders, where she stayed in the 3rd vehicle and let the chain of command sort itself out. She had never met that version of herself. She suspected, in the parts of her she did not examine often, that no such version had ever existed. "Bauer's down," she had said into the net, and her voice had not shaken, because she had decided, in some pre-verbal place below, thought that it would not shake, that the men on the other end of that net needed exactly one thing from her, and it was a voice that did not shake. "Sentinel has the company. Everybody breathe and follow my voice." The call sign came off that net. Sentinel, assigned by a frightened radio man in the middle of the worst morning of his life because he needed something to call the calm voice, and never given back after. She took 2 disorganized platoons and built a relief out of them with nothing but her own steadiness and a map she had memorized the night before, out of habit. And she led the counterattack herself, on foot, across a road that everyone with sense was trying to get off of. She reached the cutoff platoon. She found Specialist Milo Hartley down, conscious, unable to walk, looking up at her with the particular and total trust of a man who has decided the next face he sees will decide whether he goes home to his mother. She got him onto her back, and she carried him 400 meters to the casualty collection point, with the company laying down fire on either side of her the whole way, the road cracking and snapping around them. 400 meters. She had counted them then the way she counted paces now, 1 and 2 and 3 and on, because counting was the only thing that kept the arithmetic of that night, the men who came back and the man who did not, from becoming something she could not carry across the rest of her life. You count, and the counting holds the weight in a shape you can lift. Hartley lived. Not everyone did. She had learned over 19 years to hold both of those at the same time without setting either one down. She had written the letters herself afterward, the ones to the families. She had refused to let anyone draft them for her, because a draft is a kind of straight line, and a man's life is not a wall. She had sat up 3 nights getting the words right, and she had failed to get them right, because there were no right words. And she had sent them anyway, because the families deserved her failure more than they deserved someone else's polished success. That was the other thing the night taught her, the thing under the medal, that the work that matters is almost never the work that photographs well. It is done late, alone, by people no stand is watching, and it is the whole of the job. The Distinguished Service Cross had come later, in a ceremony she barely remembered, the ribbon set against a uniform that already felt like it belonged to a stranger. What she remembered was not the medal. It was the thing the night had taught her, and that she had spent 19 years refusing to forget. That rank is the least interesting thing about a soldier. That the people who matter on any field are almost never the ones performing for the stands. They are the quiet ones holding a line nobody is watching, in heat nobody thanks them for, doing the job because the job is there. They had called her a vendor this morning, a craft fair colonel, the clipboard lady. She had been the last voice 4 surrounded soldiers heard before the line held. The memory closed as quietly as it had opened. She came back to the parade field, to the blue sky and the bunting and the long mowed stripes of grass, to the escort 1 pace away and the staff car door swinging open into the sun. And now the audience, alone among everyone on that field, knew exactly what was about to step out of the shadow of that car. Royce lost his patience with the curb in sight. Specialist Ruiz, his voice carried, pitched to reach the front ranks, because a man who runs a morning as a performance forgets that an audience hears the ugly lines too, that a stand fills with ears as well as eyes. Escort the civilian off my field. Now. It was the line. Not a fist, never a fist. Nothing so honest as a fist. Something worse in its way. A junior officer commandeering one of his own soldiers to publicly remove a guest he had never once bothered to identify, seconds before the rendering of honors, in front of 4 companies and a set of stands now nearly full of families. Ruiz froze where he stood. Of all the people on that field, he was the one who had treated her like a person, and now he was being made the instrument of her humiliation, the hand that did the thing. He looked at the woman. He looked at Abernathy, whose face told him everything and nothing in the same flat, terrible instant. The face of a man who has decided not to stop something on purpose. "Sir," Ruiz said. His voice came out thin. "Maybe we should wait for—" "That was an order, Specialist." And the woman in the charcoal coat let him off the hook. She did not resist. She did not pull rank. She did not say 1 syllable about who she was or what the next 4 minutes were going to do to the man giving the order. She turned to Ruiz and spoke low, just to him, under the morning. "Do your job, Specialist. You've got nothing to apologize for." She gave him the only gift she could give him in that second, which was permission to obey, without carrying the shame of it for the rest of his career. Then she turned back to Royce, and for the first time all morning, she smiled. It was not a warm smile. The narrator's eye, which had watched a great many people in a great many uniforms, across a great many years, marked it as the most dangerous thing she had done since 0640. She smiled at the lieutenant, the way the sea smiles at a man who has decided the tide is his to command, patient and wide and entirely without mercy. She had stopped trying to teach him anything, She had stopped, somewhere in the last minute, expecting him to be better than he was. She had decided, simply, to let him finish building the moment he was going to have to stand inside of, and to let the field be his witness when he did. "Off my field," Royce said, riding it now, unable to stop himself, the momentum of 3 weeks and 1 morning carrying him over the edge. "We render honors in 4 minutes, and I will not have her in the frame." "Then you'd better hurry, Lieutenant," said Hargrove. There was a thing in the way she said it, level and almost kind, that should have warned him. Warnings were available to him all morning, the Sergeant Major's 2 attempts, the way every figure she quoted had been correct, the cold readiness in Abernathy's stance, the water in Ruiz's hand. A man is given many doors before the last one closes, and Royce, certain and immaculate, and 3 weeks invested in a picture, had walked past every one of them with his eyes on his watch. He heard her tell him to hurry, and he heard only a civilian being difficult to the very end, and he gave the order one more time with his hand pointed at the gate. Ruiz lifted the lightest possible hand toward her elbow, barely a touch, less than a touch, the gesture of a man guiding someone he has already half decided in his heart not to guide anywhere at all. And across the long stripes of grass, the figure stepping out of the staff car, a service uniform heavy with the dull gleam of stars across the shoulders, stopped dead, looked straight at the woman being walked off the grass, and changed direction toward her at a pace that turned every head in the stands, the pace a man only ever breaks into for one reason in his entire life: to render honors before he is late. Major General Karl Lindqvist crossed the last of the grass and came to attention in front of the woman in the charcoal coat. He did not shout. He did not need to. 53 years old, the post commander, the scheduled reviewing officer for the morning, and he said her rank, the way you set down something very heavy with great care, so that nothing breaks and nobody is hurt by the weight of it. "General Hargrove, ma'am." A breath. "I'm sorry. I didn't see your car. I would have met you at the gate." The word traveled. "General." It crossed the front rank, and the front rank stopped breathing. It moved up into the stands and along the line of cadre, and it reached First Lieutenant Spencer Royce, and it did not fit anywhere it landed. Not in his ears, not in his understanding, not in the morning he had built. His clipboard did not fall. He was far too rigid for that. His face did the falling instead. First, the blank confusion of a man who has heard a word that does not belong in the sentence, who waits for it to be corrected. Then the disbelief, the small involuntary headshake, the certainty that he had misheard, that the general meant someone else, anyone else. Then the recognition, arriving all at once in a single cold flood as he replayed every line he had said to her since first light. Vendor, craft fair, hospitality tent. There's a process. Off my field. Each sentence came back to him now in his own bright, confident voice, perfectly preserved, and there was nowhere on that immaculate grass to put a single one of them. Then the horror, complete and quiet and final, and his alone. He had ordered a soldier to escort a 3-star general off her own reviewing field, 4 minutes before she was to take the salute. The arithmetic finished itself in him, and there was nothing left standing of the morning he had spent 3 weeks building. Lindqvist turned from her to the formation and to the adjutant, and he did the thing the whole field had been bending toward all morning without knowing it. He yielded the honor. "Adjutant." His voice, on the amplified line now, rolled out flat and clear across the companies. "The reviewing officer this morning is Lieutenant General Eleanor Hargrove." He let it sit one full beat, let it reach the last rank. "The parade will render honors to General Hargrove." And then, turning back to her, quieter, meant only for her, but the open microphone caught it and carried it across the field anyway, the sentence the morning had been promising from its first cruel minute. "Ma'am, will you take the salute?" "I will," said Hargrove. She shrugged out of the charcoal raincoat and handed it, without looking, to a sergeant major who was already there at her shoulder to take it, because Abernathy had been moving toward her from the moment the word "general" left the general's mouth. Under the coat there was nothing dramatic. A plain, dark suit, her own bearing, which had always been the only uniform the moment required, and which the coat had only ever hidden. She walked to the reviewing position, the exact patch of ground she had been ordered away from twice in one morning. Lindqvist fell in a respectful half-step behind her and to her side, the host yielding to the senior. And the companies passed in review. Royce, as adjutant, had to present the formation to her. He had to bring his own hand up in a salute to the woman he had spent a morning trying to file and verify and remove, and he had to hold it, arm aching, eyes front, while 4 companies marched past the person he had called a vendor. Abernathy, off to the flank, allowed himself one small nod, 30 years of patience cached in a single inch of chin. And Specialist Caleb Ruiz, who had escorted a 3-star general exactly 1 step across the grass, stood at rigid attention with his eyes wet and shining and fixed on the colors as they came. The woman who had counted the cadence from the wrong side of the rope now received the entire parade. 120 steps to the minute. Exactly. The band did not dare let it creep. Not one beat. Not today. And the strangest thing, the thing the families in the stands would never understand, and the soldiers in the ranks would carry for the rest of their service, was how little she did. She did not gloat. She did not glance at Royce, not once, to see him suffer. She stood at the reviewing position with her hand at the brim of an invisible cover, and her eyes on the colors as each company dipped them past her, and she received the honor the way she had received the insult, completely still, giving nothing back but the thing the moment required. Tran was in that formation. He marched past her chin up and steady and alive, and she watched him go by with the particular attention she gave to every soldier whose name no stand would ever learn. And only Abernathy, watching her watch the boy, understood that the private in the 3rd rank was the one she had truly come to review. The last company cleared the stand. The final note held and died into the morning. Lieutenant General Hargrove lowered her hand, and First Lieutenant Spencer Royce stood frozen at present arms before the woman he had tried all morning to erase. The whole field and the whole story rearranged around her now like iron filings around a magnet that had been lying there in the grass the entire time. The reckoning happened in the shade behind the stand, and it was not the one Royce was braced for. He reported to her white-faced, certain his career had ended at 0810. He had run the numbers a young officer runs in that situation, and every one of them came out the same. Charges, a board of inquiry, a letter in his file, the end of the thing he had given his 20s to. He stood at attention in the shade and waited for the axe to fall, because in his understanding of the world, the axe was the only thing that came next. Hargrove did not raise her voice. She never had needed to. The men on a radio net in 2007 had taught her exactly how much voice a thing required, and it was always less than people thought. "I don't care that you didn't know who I was," she said. "Rank's the least interesting thing about either of us, Lieutenant. I care that you didn't know who he was." She let that land, watched it not land, said it plainer. "You had a private in the 3rd rank of Bravo this morning, locked his knees, about to fall on his face in front of a family that drove a long way to watch him graduate. He was 40 feet from you for an hour, a beat. And you spent that hour counting alignment. That is the only thing that happened on this field today that should embarrass you." "Ma'am," Royce managed. It was the whole of what he had. "The whole job," she said, "is seeing the people the stands don't. The quiet ones, the ones not performing for anybody. You ran a morning that was entirely about how it looked, and you never once looked at your own soldiers. That's not a paperwork problem, Lieutenant. That's the actual job, and you missed it standing right on top of it. Lindqvist, a pace away, cleared his throat. You'd be well within your rights to end him this morning, ma'am. Say the word, and it's done. Ending him is easy. Hargrove did not look away from Royce. Fixing him is the Army's money's worth. No charges, no board, no investigation. She told Lindqvist she wanted the lieutenant kept and reassigned to retrain under Command Sergeant Major Abernathy for as long as it took, until he could run a formation by caring about the soldiers standing in it instead of the photograph of it. It was the harder sentence, and every man in the shade understood that it was. She had handed a man who had braced to be destroyed a second chance he was going to have to earn every single day under the senior NCO he had brushed past with a single careless word. If you have ever watched a quiet person finally be seen, finally be counted, after a whole long morning of being talked past, you already know the particular thing it does to the chest, the way it sits warm there. That is what this channel is for. Subscribe to Honor Tales for more stories about the ones who get written off turning out every time to be the ones who held the line all along. Then she had Abernathy bring Ruiz forward. In front of the post commander, in the shade behind the stand, she recognized the specialist for bringing a cold bottle of water to a stranger that nobody else on the field would so much as look at, and for the thing that mattered far more than the water, for hesitating for that one thin beat of, "Maybe we should wait, sir," when he was ordered to do something his gut already knew was wrong. "You were the only person on that field this morning who passed the test, Ruiz," she said. "Remember that. The next time somebody tells you the easy thing is the order, you remember exactly how this morning felt." Ruiz tried to say something and could not. She did not make him. She simply held his eyes a moment longer, the same complete attention she had given him over a bottle of water 2 hours and a lifetime ago. And then she let him go back to his duties, a different soldier than the one who had walked out onto the field that morning. Royce, standing to the side, watched the specialist he had ordered to do his dirty work get thanked by a 3-star general, and something in his face that had been frozen since 0810 began, very slightly, to move. Not relief. Something harder and more useful than relief. The beginning, maybe, of the only education that ever takes. Dusk came down soft and gold over an empty field. The bleachers struck and carted away. The chairs stacked, the bunting folded down off the stand and boxed. Hargrove walked back out onto the grass alone, to the reviewing position, while across the post, the colors came down for the evening, and a bugle somewhere out past the motor pool began to play retreat, the notes carrying thin and clear across the cooling ground. She came to attention by herself, on the ground she had come up on, and rendered a slow salute to the descending flag. No phone buzzed in her pocket. No coded greeting lit a screen in the dark. No named city. No waiting mission. No shadow of the next thing crouched at the edge of the frame. There was only a woman, an empty field, and a flag coming down, which had been, all along, from 0640 to the last gold of the light, the only thing she had ever stood out there for. She held the salute until the last note. Then she lowered her hand and turned and walked off the parade ground into the dusk, unhurried and alone, the reviewing officer the morning never saw coming, leaving the field exactly as quiet as she had found it. Every soldier carries a story that few ever hear. Listen with your heart. Thank you for staying and watching. Subscribe to Honor Tales for more.